If you've been around the GameMaker community for long enough, you've probably seen this happen at least once or twice. Someone will come into the Yo-Yo forums or the subreddit or the Discord or something, and they'll ask why it's so hard to make a game in GameMaker. And then some old fart, which usually means me, will swing in and say, there is no magic make game script, you have to actually work for this, just like you would in any other game engine. And then, on occasion, someone will show up and say, hold my beer. And they'll give you a GameMaker language file, and tell you to just drag it into an empty GameMaker project, and watch what happens. So I have an empty GameMaker project here. There's nothing but the default configurations, and the empty room that comes with a new project. And I have here a file called make_game.gml. I am going to drag that into the GameMaker IDE. You can see that it's added a script called makeGame. I'm going to run the game, and I'm going to see what happens. Okay, Snake Game. Press space to play, plus enter for options made by Yosi, Meseta, and Cat. I am going to increase the size of the window a little bit to make it a little easier to see on recording. I'm going to press space to play. And we have a game. There's a little bit of a delay between when the game starts and when you can actually start moving. This is a Snake Game. I'm really bad at these. Okay. No, help. Oh god, I died. My high score is 4, apparently, because I was doing this last night. My current score is 3. Let me try one more time. Okay. I can do this. I'm not this bad at Centipede. Yes, I actually am. 1, 2, 3. Yes, okay. I almost missed that there. No. Yep. God, help. Alright, 4. I've tied my high score. Oh god. I missed the arrow key and I slammed my face into the wall. Alright, well, my high score is 4. That doesn't answer the question of how on earth does this work? So this is a gimmick. This does not invalidate the point that making a game is hard work and that there is no magic make game script, except for the part where this is actually magic. So I'm going to go through this in this video. I wanted to do this for a while. I've just kind of kept putting it off. This takes advantage of a couple, let's call them special things that GameMaker can do. This is not in any way how you should make your game, but if you're interested in some of the weirder things you can do with GameMaker, this is probably going to be right up your alley. I am going to maximize this code window, and I'm also going to just hit F12 to make everything else go away, because this is a single script game and there is really no need for anything else. So, line 1, you have this line of code called GML Pragma. And what this does is this sends special instructions to the compiler. Or I suppose if you're not using the Yo-Yo compiler, just to the program that builds your game into an executable form.
Hey.
There's a couple things you can do with GML Pragma. The one in question here is global, so it takes 2 arguments. Or in this case, it takes 2 arguments. It could take others. This is a string which says global, and after that you have make_game, also a string. And what this does is this tells GameMaker that before anything else happens, before the room creation code runs, before the object creation code runs, or anything like that, that it should run this script. That it should run the script that's calling it make_game.
Hey.
You can do other things with calling code in the global scope with GML Pragma, but most of the time what you're going to see people doing with this is calling the script itself. And it'll have like configuration or initialization code in it of some sort. When it comes to actually running the script, this does nothing. This is only a special instruction to send to the GameMaker compiler. Next, you can see Windows Set Caption, and that's fairly self-explanatory. It says the text that you see at the top of the window. In this case, Snake Game. You could change it to anything you want. That's not too difficult. Below this, and the syntax highlighting is all messed up. Can I refresh that? There we go. Syntax highlighting. Thank you, GameMaker IntelliSense, for not doing anything until after I actually save changes to the code. This is just setting up a couple of enums and constants. You have the game state enumerated constant. You have the player state enumerated constant. You have a couple actual macro constants down here. I'm not going to spend too much time describing those. Let's minimize that region of code so that it's not in the way. After that, you have what is described as a game super hack init over 9000. And it basically is game super hack init over 9000. I'm going to be saying that about a lot of the things in this code here. So if event type equals 0 and event number equals 0, this, as you can see from the comment, this forces this part of the code to only run on global init, which is to say when code is called in the global scope with the GML pragma function. After that, down here, this is what GameMaker user Catseye likes to call the get current script hack. GameMaker doesn't have a built-in way of obtaining the current script that actual code is running in, probably due to the fact that in any serious programming situation, that's not information you would actually need because you know what script is running your code. But in this case, because we are doing unusual things with GameMaker, you really would like to obtain that information. So debug get call stack. This, as the name suggests, is a debug function that gives you the current call stack. If you don't know what a call stack is, if you've ever had your game crash, you know what the call stack looks like. It's just the list of scripts that are, or other places in code that are currently running. It looks like this. And you can pull information out of that. Debug get call stack returns an array of strings, which are basically the lines that you will see in those error messages. And the next couple lines of code here, they pull the entry at the top of the at the end of the array, at the top of the script stack, because this is an array and not an actual stack, which honestly would be handy when you're using debug get call stack, because that's what you'd expect, but that's neither here nor there. And since the strings in the array that is returned by debug get call stack also contain some information such as like current line and the GML underscore script underscore prefix, you need to remove that information by removing any information that comes after the colon, and also just replacing the GML script prefix at the beginning with an empty string. And then you have the script name as a string, and you need to turn that into an asset index using the asset get index function. So you now have the index of the script that's currently running. You can do things with it. And the next piece of like mad science that's going on here, I'm going to run out of ways to describe this magic script here by the end of the video. GameMaker Studio 2, if I were to go back over here, if you go into rooms, you probably know that they have layers. Instances, backgrounds, that sort of thing. A thing that you can do with a layer is you can attach a script to it. So first you need to make sure that there is indeed a layer that you can use. So we will just look at the first room with the room underscore first built-in GameMaker variable, which is one of the ones that I always forget exists because I never use it. You can create a new layer. Depth equals -16,000. I guess that's just a way of ensuring that it probably won't collide with anything else that exists in the room, although if you're just using an empty GameMaker project, it shouldn't. And then layer script begin. So something you can do with layers is have them run scripts. That's not something that I believe is especially well documented, but that is a thing that you can indeed do with layers in GameMaker Studio 2, and it's essentially how you get a game running with a step event and a draw event without having an object to run those step events, in this case. Not that you ever would otherwise, because please, don't do this. Although, to be honest, this is, now that I think about it, this could be an interesting game jam topic. Make a game using only one script like this. So I'm going to, that's it for this block of code. I'm going to fold that region up. Move on to game init. This is fairly straightforward. This is some debug stuff here. There's nothing especially interesting going on in it, other than DS exists. You can check for whether or not a data structure exists, its index. In this case, it checks to see if a map exists with index 0, and if it does, it reads some debug information out of it. After that, variable global exists, make game init. So this is, well, one of the ways that this script makes sure that the initialization code only runs once. Variable global exists isn't a function that I'm a fan of in any way, shape, or form, but it is one of the weird hacks that allows this whole thing to work. You can check for the existence of variables. I am a firm believer in that if you don't know whether or not a variable has been defined, you should ensure that you do have a way of knowing that a variable has been defined, which means, defining it in a create event somewhere.
Hey.
But due to the way that GameMaker works internally, you have the ability to check if that is the case. If it does not, that means the game has not been initialized, and you run all this in initialization code. There's a bunch of things that happen. You create a camera to go with the view, you resize the game window to whatever you want the game window to be resized to. More camera setup. These are some game state pieces of information. Set the game state, create the grid for the snake to live on, create the snake, and so on and so forth. These are mostly variable definitions. I don't think I have to explain it. Down here, this is where stuff starts to get interesting again. This is where the sprites come from, even though there are no sprites defined in the sprites folder, or in the included files folder. So you can encode image information in different ways. Most of the time, you will obviously have your images just as sprites in the sprites folder. But you could also save sprite information by having the sprite drawn to a surface, converting the surface to a buffer, and then doing things with the buffer. That is a strategy that I use myself sometimes. I would also like to hide the resource window again because I need the space. And the buffer would ordinarily be binary data. And you wouldn't be able to represent it with text, but you can then convert any given buffer to base 64, which is what you see here. Base 64 is essentially just a way of representing binary data as plain text.
Hey.
You have 26 lowercase letters, 26 capital letters, 10 digits, and the slash and plus characters, giving you a total of 64 characters to represent information. And at that point, it becomes fairly trivial for the computer to do just a change of base and convert that to binary, containing 8-bit bytes. GameMaker will do that for you. You can encode and decode base 64 information. This here is the snake sprite encoded as base 64. Oh, by the way, if you've ever seen a YouTube URL, if you've wondered where you might have seen this in the wild, YouTube URLs are base 64. They just use dash and underscore instead of / and plus.
Hey.
Because / means something else in a URL. And I believe the plus character would conflict with the internal lookup mechanism, but that's neither here nor there. YouTube URLs are base 64. So as I said, decode the sprite into a buffer. This here is checking to see if the sprite is compressed or not by checking the beginning of by checking the first couple bytes in the buffer. The first 2 bytes in the buffer. Compressed buffers have a special header. If it finds the sprite is compressed, it decompresses it. If it finds the sprite is not compressed, then it runs with it. After that, you read some more information out of the buffer. There's the height, width, frame count, frame number, that sort of thing. And we come down here, we scroll down, and we do the same thing again for the apple sprite. I don't know why it's called an apple and not, like, player or whatever. Well, it wouldn't be the player because the player is the snake. This is the thing that you're chasing after, anyway. This is a somewhat bigger sprite. You do the same thing. I believe this one has frames of animation. And, I can't remember what the base 64 equivalent of the compressed file header looks like, but if I had to guess, these are both compressed, just if nothing else so that they take up less space in the script. At the bottom, I'll be honest, I don't know what this line does. This creates a networking socket. I don't know if there was networking that goes on in this game or anything like that. I've only done it with single player. I don't know if there's some weird hack that happens with the networking socket to make this work. There might be. Maybe that's how make_game handles user events or something. So that's done. That's it for the init section. I'm going to close that. The next section is quite short, mercifully short. This just says draw event limiter. This prevents the script from running in anything except the draw GUI event. Will GameMaker actually let you use a return statement without anything after it? You didn't used to be able to. You used to have to specifically return something, even a 0, even if your script didn't normally return a value. That's good to know. Anyway, all this does is prevent the script from running outside of the draw GUI event.
Hey.
After that, This is a big old section labeled state machine, which is basically what it is. So you check the game state. On the main menu, you draw the text that says Snake Game, press space to play, plus enter for options. And the, made by Meseta and Cat. And then it checks for input. If you press the space button, the space bar, start the game. If you press the enter key, go to the settings window. I am going to close that. After that, settings, more of the same. If you press the arrow keys, you change the resolution. It's fairly simple. Always remember to resize the application surface if you set the window size, otherwise unusual things might happen. And then press enter to go back. Begin play state. This, I believe, has a counter, has a countdown. Yeah, there's a spawn timer, which is the delay between when you enter gameplay and when you can actually start playing. You set some things up on the grid. There's the snake, there's the food. I believe the food for the snake, the apple, whatever that happens to be, will always be in the same place on the screen at the start of the game, and then once you start playing, it'll randomize whenever you eat them. And then, of course, it just draws some things. Let's move on. This is where the game is running. When the countdown timer finishes... I'm sorry, that's not when the countdown timer finishes. This is just setting up the game. This is actually running it. If the countdown timer is still running... is not running, rather. You are allowed to enter play if you press one of the arrow keys. Otherwise, you have to hold. If the game is actively running... these are the controls. This determines movement. It's not the most elegant movement code you've ever seen, but in a game where everything is controlled by global variables, it's adequate. This is where the position information for the snake is updated. Add new coordinates to the list, but in a chirpy binary format. I have a funny feeling Cat was the one who wrote that. I don't especially feel like explaining movement code, even if it's somewhat obscure. If you die, if you run out of the grid, or I believe the rule is if you run into yourself. Yeah, if the grid contains yourself. Then that's a game over condition. You go to the dying state, and then you check the high score, which is stored in a buffer somewhere. This is stored on your computer's hard drive, so it's not completely self-contained. This is why when I ran the game last night, my high score carried over from then to now. It's also scored as JSON because well, all the cool kids are using JSON these days. Let's see. If I... Snake? Oh, yes, I missed this very funny comment earlier. If I close that... Did I miss a section down below? I think I might have. Alright, this is... I need to minimize this. Below the game over check, you can... you check to see if you're actually eating something, which would be a good thing. If it still can't spawn food, the game just dies. I can't say I've ever gotten that far in the game where that might have happened, but it looks like the game just closes if if there's no available empty space. And also, holy cow, this hurts. Who wrote this? Guys, please. Your code formatting hurts my soul. Let's see. After that, that looks like it's it for eating. Nothing too exciting in there. Just check to see if there are available positions to spawn food. When you enter the dying state, this is just the game over timer. If the game over timer expires, you go to the end screen. Is that the end of this region? That is the end of this region. I can close this. And the end screen is just basically the same as the title screen, except instead of displaying the press space to start information, well, no, it does that too. This basically is the title screen, plus the high score, minus the credit line. That's what's missing. That is make game. There is, as you can see at the bottom, a default case where if something were to go wrong, which it shouldn't because there's really no way for this script itself to go wrong, unless you start messing with it. The game just ends if it breaks. That is make_game. The meat and potatoes of it, the state machine, this is basically akin to if you were to just run your entire game in the draw event, plus some weird hacks to deal with global variables when you don't have objects. Oh, by the way, did I actually talk about drawing the snake? That might be worth talking about. I mentioned you can convert sprites to surfaces and convert the surfaces to buffers. You can also do the opposite. You can, if I scroll down, here it is. You can put information from a buffer onto a surface using the buffer get surface function. which is one that I legitimately have use for now and again. This also has the honor of being the first time I've ever seen anyone in the wild use the offset value when setting a buffer to a surface. And anyway, the snake is essentially the same thing. Is the snake sprite done anything in here? Yes, there's a snake in the apple. So that's how that works. That's another GameMaker hack for drawing sprites that you just happen to want to store in base 64. Anything else? That's really it. As I said, the state machine it's essentially just running the entire game in the draw event. GameMaker gurus would get mad at you for doing that. I don't especially care. The authors of this magic script obviously don't care either, at least for the purposes of this. Most of the mad science happens up here in the init stages, where you basically take a script and make it insert itself into the game's update loop. So that's very cool. I'll run it again. I'll see if I can score I'll see if I can score anything higher than 4. Let me make it bigger. Press space to play. And here we go. Ooh, no help. 4, 5. Oh god, I can't double back on myself, otherwise I die. I scored 5. That's good enough. This has been make_game. As I said, this is mostly a joke to see some of the weirder things you can do with some of the more advanced features of GameMaker. I find it rather cynically amusing how it tries to present itself as a simple magic, just load this into your game and you have a game script, while in reality, if you look inside it, it does a lot of really weird and, in some places, advanced things to make that happen. And I like to think it actually does a really good job of communicating the point that there is no easy answers in game dev. Alright, that's it. My name is Dragonite. This has been make_game. If you know any other weird things to do in GameMaker, let me know. I do enjoy those things more than I maybe should. If you want to ask the authors of the script any questions, I will include a link to Meseta's and Kat's Twitters in the description of the video. You can direct all your complaints there. I mean, compliments. I don't know if Yosi has a Twitter or not. I will try and track it down. Otherwise, the GameMaker Discord he fairly regularly participates in. I'll also have a link to the actual script itself in the video description. Either the original source, my GitHub, or both, depending on what I can dig up about it. Anyway, I will see you all later.